Hey guys, I'm Elizabeth McCravey, a website designer and business coach for entrepreneurs and your host for the Breakthrough Brand podcast, the show that's all about pulling back the curtain on how to actually build a successful business. I don't skim the surface around here. If you want a deep dive into the nitty-gritty details of what it takes to run a successful business and stand out in a crowd, you're in the right place. After creating a multiple six-figure-a-year website design business in my 20s, I'm ready to share everything I've learned and everything I'm still learning because I believe the keys to building a thriving business should never be a secret. Here you'll find episodes that are actionable, direct, and fun, like friends chatting business over coffee, and a fresh, honest take on the reality of being an entrepreneur. If you're ready to master online marketing, branding, website design, mindset, and business strategy, then this is the podcast for you. It's time to build your breakthrough brand. Let's do this. Hello, friends. Welcome back to the Breakthrough Brand podcast. Are you ready to talk productivity? So today's episode is a recast, actually, of episode 82. It aired back in September of 2020. And if you're wondering, well, Elizabeth, why are you re-airing this episode with a new intro? Well, this is actually one of the top episodes of the podcast, as in it's one of the top 5 most downloaded. It's one of the most listened to, and it's one where I consistently get DMs on Instagram about or emails about with like questions or like, oh my gosh, that episode was so helpful types of messages. So if you never listened to it back in 2020, now's the perfect time to listen. And maybe you did listen. Maybe you're like, oh, this topic sounds familiar, but like, I'm not even sure if I implemented that stuff. Or if you feel like, oh my gosh, my productivity could seriously use some help at this point in my life, it is time for a re-listen. So these tips are still as relevant today as they were when I originally aired this last year. And as the title says, I'm all about working smarter, not harder. And that doesn't mean that hard intentional work isn't important, but there are things we can do to get more out of like every ounce of our workday to use our time better, little hacks so we can have more time back to do other things besides running our businesses. So when I originally outlined this episode, the question I was asking myself was, what are some of those things for me? Like, what are the things I'm doing that allow me to work smarter, not harder? What little hacks allow me to get more done in less time? Because fun fact, guys, I do not work 40 hours a week. I work consistently less than that and run a multiple six-figure-a-year business. And we're way on track to pass $500,000 in revenue this year without me working all the time. And this is some of the stuff that seriously helps with that. So that's what this episode is. It's those tips. And I'd encourage you as you listen to this to try to take 1 or 2 of these and implement it this week. So as you're listening through all these I'm sharing, think about like, okay, yes, which one resonates with you? Which one sounds interesting? Which one do you think would help you? Write it down, jot it down on your phone, and do it for yourself this week. Implement that tip. So now, let's play this episode, my 7 secrets to working smarter, not harder, and getting hours of your life back. This first one is going to be one that might completely catch you off guard because this is one I feel like not enough people know about. It might sound a little hokey too, so I want to throw that out there, but this is seriously a favorite thing that helps me stay focused. And I want to say it's worth trying too, because this is probably like the most low maintenance, easiest to implement tip I'm going to share. And that is listening to binaural beats. Okay, if you're like, I don't know what that is, I'm going to explain, but there is a YouTube video, okay? And it's just one YouTube video, it's the only one I listen to, that I let play in the background on my computer on most of my work days. And I've done this, for at least a year now. It's hard for me to remember exactly when or how I found this YouTube video, but at least a year of time. And the video, it's not a song, it's not a TV show, it's nothing like that. It's binaural beats and isotones is what it's called. And the title of the video, I'm going to actually link to it directly in the show notes so you can just click over. But the title is Focus and Creativity, Creative Thinking, Visualization, and Problem Solving, Binaural and Isotone Beats. And this video has over 2 million plays. So clearly I'm not the only one who loves it. But I want to kind of tell you, it's like 4 hours-ish of just, again, like really subtle audio, like is the best way to describe it. And I want to kind of read you a little bit of what they say about it so you can just understand like why this is supposed to be powerful for focusing. So it says this audio, which can be used during work, study, or meditation, uses alternating sequences of beta, alpha, and theta waves to encourage fluid and abstract creative thinking, which is the alpha and theta waves, while at the same time maintaining a state of focus, which is the beta waves, for effective problem solving and high level information processing. So it moves through those three frequencies of the alpha, theta, and beta tones in 5-minute increments and I want to say, I literally have it pulled up. I think it's like 4 hours-ish. Yeah, it's literally exactly at 4 hours of audio. And again, it tells you in the description more about it, but I'd recommend just trying it, playing this in the background while you work, whether that's on your computer or you put it on your phone and do it through your headphones, either way. And for this, I keep the volume really low. So it's not something like you don't want to play super loud. You don't even want to really notice it. For me, I almost don't hear it, especially depending on which one of those different tones it's at. I won't even hear it. I keep it pretty low, but it's still in the background happening while I'm working. And now if you're like, okay, when should I listen to this? So my favorite time to listen to this is when I'm writing. And I do a lot of writing in my business, like more than I even realize sometimes. So every podcast episode, starts as an outline. I literally listened to it about 2 hours ago when I was outlining the episode I'm now recording. I write social media posts, typically like 4 of those a week. There's email marketing. And now I'm writing my course content, which I've been listening to this on repeat when I'm writing the course content. So when I do my design work though, that's the time I'm not listening to this because I typically like to listen to music or a podcast or even a TV show sometimes when I'm doing like deep into like building a website or something, which is something I was doing all day yesterday actually. But for me, listening to this while I'm writing is really key. And I know in your business, you probably also do some writing. And it might totally be all in my head. So if you're listening to me talking about this and you're like, oh, Elizabeth, that's not making you more productive, that's okay for you to think that. But I don't think it's all in my head, but I totally get that some people might. But I really do feel so productive and focused when I'm listening to this while working. So again, I'm linking directly to the YouTube video in the show notes. So you can just click over to it and this can become your favorite, like a most played YouTube video too. Or you can explore, there's so many of these online besides the one I use, but I've used this one for over a year. So I'm just like, I'm sticking with what I know. But that's my first one, listening to binaural beats while you're working. Okay, the second one, schedule your entire workday in advance. And when you guys have heard me talk about this before, first of all. So let me just say that if you're like, oh, I've heard you talk about this, let me let you hear me talk about it again, because if you aren't taking action on this yet, maybe I can convince you to right now. But when you talk about working smarter, not harder, planning is so key to that. So when you go into your workday with no game plan, you're going to be responding to everything reactively. Reactive to every email that comes in, to like the client question, to answering the phone, to like spending too much time on social media. Reactive to do also whatever's easiest tends to be what we do when we don't have a plan. Like I know for me, it's so much easier for me to just like sit on Tailwind and like pin Pinterest content. Whereas that's not necessarily the time best spent in my business when I'm at my state of being most productive, which for me is at the beginning of the workday. So basically you waste a lot of time when you don't have a plan, and I'm all about working less. Like I said in the intro, I don't typically work more than 40 hours a week. Some weeks I certainly do. I do track all my time. So I do, like at the end of every week, I'm able to say, this is how many hours I was literally on the clock. And most weeks it's less than 40 hours. So anytime though that I can avoid doing stupid, unproductive stuff in my business, I take it because I want those hours I'm putting in to give me the most back out of them. And many of you know about me doing my whole scheduled the entire work week in advance because I did do a whole podcast episode on it. And that's episode 46 of the podcast. It literally came out on New Year's Eve last year, and it's been one of the most downloaded episodes on my show. People really love it. I still get messages about like how impactful it was. And so I'm going to just direct you to that if you have not heard about me talk about this before versus like going into all the details again, because that's like a 1 hour long-ish episode. But basically, every Sunday night or afternoon, I schedule everything on a calendar. So I write out a to-do list that's like, okay, here are all the things I need to do this week. Everything from like, I want to work out 3 times to like, I need my admin time in the inbox to I have to finish the first draft of this client's website. Like it all gets written down and then I put it all in the calendar on a digital calendar. And then I just follow the calendar. So in my week, I look at, okay, today's Thursday. What do I need to do today in this order? And yes, life happens and things get moved around. Like literally, you guys, last week, what day was that? I think it was actually Wednesday or Thursday of last week. But my husband, Adam, got stung by a yellow jacket. And now we found out he has an extreme allergy to yellow jackets, but he had a horrible, scary allergic reaction. He like blacked out, could barely walk. I had to take him to the hospital and I spent from like 3 p.m. to 8 p.m. at the hospital that day. And that obviously was not on the calendar. And my day got flexed and I really didn't even care about the stuff that was on the to-do list anymore because I was just caring about making sure he was okay. But for most weeks, you're going to find that if you choose to stick to what's on the calendar, you're able to. And it really helps you get everything that needs done in that week. And it's so fascinating to me watching how this helped me this week. So I want to kind of share an example. Interrupting this episode with a suggestion for the small business owners listening. Ever wonder what you should do for healthcare when you and your spouse are both self-employed so there's no work-provided health insurance to participate in? Well, when my husband Adam joined me in the entrepreneurial job space over 4 years ago, we joined Christian Healthcare Ministries instead of getting traditional health insurance. And it was the best decision for us, especially in these years of growing and raising a family while also running multiple businesses. CHM is a health cost-sharing ministry and is a faith-based alternative to health insurance. We did tons of research before choosing CHM, and if you know me and Adam, you know we are all about doing the math when making big or small financial decisions. And even though it's not insurance, CHM shares 100% of eligible medical bills, which is more than the typical 70 or 80% of medical bills paid for by insurance companies. All sharing is determined by the CHM guidelines, which you can check out before and after joining. And for the mamas and mamas to be listening, you truly cannot find a better healthcare option for maternity care. I had a vaginal delivery and a C-section and birth center care and hospital care between my 2 pregnancies and births, and it was all 100% shared for. And outside of birth, we've had our share of emergency room visits and procedures as a family, and those costs were all shared by members at Christian Healthcare Ministries, leaving us only paying our monthly contribution. CHM is less expensive month to month than insurance, and because there's no network, you can choose your care with whichever providers best fit your family. I seriously just cannot recommend Christian Healthcare Ministries enough. You've got to check them out. Go to elizabethmccravey.com/CHM for more information. Also putting that link in the show notes, elizabethmccravey.com/CHM. Now back to the episode. But this week, I had a few really important things to work on. So just kind of tell you what they were, because today's Thursday that I'm recording this, and I'm a couple weeks early on the podcast. So you guys are hearing this a while after I'm recording it. But one thing was getting started on a custom website project, which entailed me coming up with like the fonts and color choices and doing a whole first draft of the homepage and sending it to the client. And then I wanted to do a couple days worth of focusing on writing for my course that's coming out at some point for designers. I'm writing all the content that's going to be in the lessons. And so I had a goal of like one day I wanted to write in the entire module on pricing in your business. And there's another module I'm going to work on later this week. And then I also had the goal of outlining a podcast episode and recording it, which is what I'm doing right now. And so those 3 things were like, okay, those are like the must get dones in order to keep moving my business forward. And any of those could feel more urgent. Like, for example, the client work could feel like, oh my gosh, that's so much more important than me working on my course. I don't even have a launch date for the course yet. Like, that can totally wait. But this client, I told them I would have this stuff to them by Friday because I did tell the client that. So when I put it on the calendar, instead of everything feeling so urgent on Monday that I can't focus on anything, I'm able to see that I put Wednesday, which again, I'm recording this on a Thursday. So Wednesday of this week, I spent the entire day working on this client's project. And then this morning, I was able to send them the first draft of everything. And then on Tuesday, also in the afternoon, I worked on the client project. So because of that, on Monday, I was able to spend the entire day working on my course without feeling any guilt around it. Because I'm like, the client stuff, even though that has the due date that's the soonest, I have an entire day planned for that on my calendar, and I know it's going to get taken care of. Same for this podcast. Like, I need to get this recorded because literally one of my teammates who works a lot on this podcast. She's going to be out of town, and so I have a date I have to have this done by, but I know it's going to be done because it's on the calendar. So this helps not make everything feel urgent, basically. So yeah, anyway, that's just a little explanation of how it's helpful, but go listen to that episode to learn how to do it. It's episode 46. And then if you're like, okay, I'm not ready to do that yet, but like, let me try a mini version of this today or maybe tomorrow. What I would tell you to do is pick 3 things that are on your agenda, or 3 things, maybe you don't even have an agenda right now, but 3 things that like you need to do that are must do things, and put them on the calendar. Or if you don't want to, just decide like, okay, I'm going to write a list that today, these are the 3 most important things I need to get done. And one of them might be that you just like manage your email inbox, and one of them might be client work, whatever it is, but write them down and decide to like make sure that you actually get those 3 things done. Another way to do it would be to look at your whole week and pick 3 big picture things that you're like, that absolutely has to be done this week. Like I said, for me, it was writing my course, a client project, in this episode. Those are like my 3 big things for the week. But anyway, focusing on that is going to help you be more productive and get more time back, because you're not just letting your time run you, you're literally running your day. So that's the second tip: schedule your entire work week in advance. So those were kind of my first 2 longest tips. Some of these are going to get shorter as I continue going here, guys, just so you know. Okay, the third tip. This one's going to sound funny, but do batch work-ish. I'm not going to actually encourage like the full batching system necessarily, but I want to kind of tell you how I do this. So I say ish because I am literally not perfect at all at batch working. I think getting stuck in like it has to be done one way really causes us not to do it at all. So everyone's heard of batch working at this point, if you're in the online business space, probably. But basically, it's focusing on one thing for a long time instead of moving between tasks. So it could look like you spend 2 hours on client work, then 2 hours on admin work in your business. Instead of an alternative way of doing it would be like you kind of do 30 minutes on a client project, and then you go in your inbox, and then you have this phone call, then you're back to the client project, and now you're writing an email, and now you're doing a social media post, and now all of a sudden you're moving between so many things in the day. And that's obviously less productive because you get out of the flow of things. And the reason I say I'm into like batch-ish working is because I know people, I have friends who do crazy types of batch working, like things like recording 7 podcasts in a day, or doing 10 meetings over a 2-day period, or doing what's called like A weeks and B weeks, where like one week is focused on a particular thing and then the next week's focused on another thing, and you like alternate between weeks. So all of those are awesome. And maybe that's something to look into for yourself. If you're like, ooh, the A week, B week, that sounds like it'd work well in my business. Definitely look into all that. You can read about it all over the internet and find other podcasts that talk about it. And I think those things sound so nice, but they have never seemed to work for me. So for me, like doing a whole week focused on only one piece of my business and ignoring other things is not practical at this point and where I'm at in my business. But for me, what does work is spending one day focused on one thing. That's been really amazing for me. And I've done a lot of this lately with working on my course, because I've found that if I'm like, oh, I'm going to spend an hour here and there writing for it, it's just not going to happen. I need to be like this whole day I'm working on it, and then the next day I'm like putting it aside. And I'd love to do a whole week at some point working on it, but again, like it feels less practical to me because of other things I have to do in like client projects and running my template shop and all of that. But it does help me get in the zone doing it the way I'm talking about. So For me, what this looks like, and again, I want you to figure out like what should this look like for you, but it looks like batching podcast writing and recording together, batching all my design work together, and then batching things that are like marketing related, like social media caption writing, email marketing writing, those kinds of things together. I also love batching recording videos because then you can just get all ready and glammed up at once and then just change clothes. It's really nice to not have to like do those all the time. So those are some things I like to batch, but the goal is to let your mind get in the zone, and then you'll get more done because you're allowing yourself to focus on just that one thing versus moving your mind to a lot of different unrelated tasks. So for me, yesterday, you guys, I legitimately spent the entire day on my client's project. Like I say entire day, but I actually had a meeting at like 9:30 a.m. that was about 30 minutes long. And then I had a break in the afternoon where I did 30 minutes in my inbox, but I didn't even like text with people. I didn't really post on social media either. I just went to work on the site from, I guess, like 10 a.m. till about like 6 p.m. And I really got in the zone and finished up the whole homepage versus if I had been designing a little bit and then I got to write a blog post, then I got to record a podcast, then I got to do a social post, all of those things. It really makes us less productive. And a cool thing too, even as I say that, I actually did post on Instagram yesterday, but it was a pre-planned post that I wrote during a batching session last week where I wrote about 10 Instagram posts all at once. So it was all done in advance. So my tip for you here is to look at your to-do list or calendar if you do schedule out things on your calendar like I talk about on my podcast. And see if there's any items that you should group together on the same day because they relate to one another and because you'll be able to stay in the flow by doing them back to back. So kind of look for those items and then see how you can maybe group them together so you can stay in a flow state of, writing or recording or whatever it is, designing, coaching, whatever. Okay, so now let's move on to tip number 4. This one's going to be a shorter tip, but my tip is take a break. And again, this one, like, please do not turn me off if this feels like, oh my gosh, Elizabeth, stop, too obvious. I get it, that's obvious, but so many of us don't do this, and I can fall victim to this as well. But there are so many studies online, seriously, just Google it. I'm not even going to reference any because they're all over the place, but talking about how we can't focus on a task for as long as sometimes we want to think we can. I've seen people say 57 minutes is the max. I've seen 25 minutes, whatever. There are different studies that say different things, but thinking that you can just go for like 6 hours straight on something without getting up from your desk is not realistic. And you might actually be able to do it, but your productivity is going down so much with every passing hour or every passing minute or whatever, that if you just took a break for say like 15 minutes and then went back to your computer fresh, you are literally going to get stuff done faster. So it's like, why would you not do that? And breaks are fun, right? So that's another reason of like, why would you not do that? And in addition to that, like besides just losing productivity, your eyes might start to hurt from staring at the computer too long. Your back can hurt from sitting all day. Breaks are vital. And when I say yesterday that I was working all day on that client project, I took multiple breaks throughout the day to refresh, go outside, all kinds of things. So if you're like, okay, Alyssa, practically though, what kind of breaks could I take just in the middle of the workday when I'm working on my business? So I'm going to tell you guys, here are some breaks I do. So first break, I take an actual lunch break. I do not eat at my computer while working at the same time. And most of my lunch breaks are alone. Like I don't have children. My husband works outside of the home, except for during COVID. He's been home a lot, but he actually just started a new job this week, but typically, like sometimes he's with me, sometimes he's not. But even if it's me alone, I take a lunch break, typically 30 to 45 minutes. And most of that time I'm not eating. Eating's typically like 10 to 15 minutes of that time. But I make a point to actually take a break away from my computer, out of my office. Another kind of break I always do is walks. And on this note, I know not everyone has a walkable neighborhood, so this might not be practical for you. But for us, when I lived in an apartment and in our house now, we have a great neighborhood for walking. We're in a really big subdivision. So typically at least once a day, I will just walk straight out my front door wearing flip-flops. I don't even put on like workout shoes or clothes or anything. Just put in my AirPods, put on some sunglasses, and I'll just do like a 10-minute walk around our neighborhood. And I sometimes will even do like a 5-minute walk. It's funny because we live up on a hill. Our neighborhood's super, super hilly, but we live up on a hill, and sometimes I'll walk all the way to the bottom of the hill and then walk back up. And that's like 5 minutes, but it just still gets me outside. It gets me moving a little bit and away from my computer. Another type of break I like to do is reading. If you know me, you know I love reading. So sometimes I'll take like a 10 to 15 minute break and I get out my iPad and read a book I'm reading. And 10 to 15 minutes looks like, in most of the books I read, like reading one chapter, which is a great like kind of away from work break to take. Another kind of break is doing errands. Sometimes, I'm all about batching errands together. That's something that could have been a tip on here of like, when you need to go to Kroger, also go to the post office and the bank and other things that are nearby. But for me, sometimes I'm like, I just need a break away from the computer for a minute. So I'll throw in a quick errand that might not be the most productive thing to do in that moment, but makes the most sense to kind of get me away from the computer for a minute. So actually today, I outlined this episode, and then I typically like to take a little break before I go straight from outlining to recording. So I went to Walgreens and picked up my husband's EpiPen, per what I was saying about the emergency room situation last week. So we got him many prescriptions, but the EpiPen came in now. And so I went and picked that up and then came back, and it was like about a 10-minute errand because we live really close to Walgreens. But I went, maybe more like 15 minutes, but I went and did that and then came back, and now I'm here recording. But that like getting up for a minute was helpful to me. Another type of break I like to do is workouts. When you're self-employed, guys, you can make your own schedule. So if you don't love working out in the mornings, if you don't love working out at 6 p.m., you can work out in the afternoon or in the mid-morning. So for me, I do like morning workouts, but not every day it's as practical for me. So a lot of times I do workouts in the afternoon. I'll take my lunch break, I'll go back to work for like an hour or two, and then I'll go to the gym as like a literal break. And it'll take me about an hour total round trip between the working out and the driving and all that. Another kind of break is just lay down on your sofa or in your bed and close your eyes, take a nap, or take a pretend nap and just like rest your eyes for a minute. The point is though, taking a break, and again, it might not sound intuitive to you, but like taking a break will help you work smarter, not harder, because you're going to be able to be more focused and on your A game when you do get back into the work. All right, and on to the fifth secret to working smarter, not harder. I keep wanting to say harder, not smarter. I don't know why I'm saying that wrong. Smarter, not harder. Okay, number 5, be intentional about when you take meetings. And I mean meetings for work and for personal life. And this is a mistake I see so many newer entrepreneurs make. And the reason is because when you first start, you're probably not taking as many meetings. You don't have as many clients. You're not doing as many discovery calls. You might not be doing podcast interviews, and you don't have some main kind of marketing thing you're doing. But at some point in your business, maybe you've already started this up, or maybe you will eventually, but you will likely have a calendar where people are scheduling meetings with you, whether that's your clients or potential clients, or, someone who might be buying a product from you, whatever it is, but people are scheduling meetings with you. And I highly recommend having a call scheduler, because otherwise you're going to just be going back and forth with someone who's in a different time zone with you, trying to figure that out. But basically, people are scheduling meetings with you, or you're scheduling meetings with people. But if you have, let's say, 4 20-minute meetings, one every hour of your workday, you're not going to be able to do batch working like I was mentioning a minute ago, because you're going to be constantly being pulled out of what you're doing for that 20-minute call. And it might feel like, oh, it's just 20 minutes. But when you start having a ton of those, you're not really running your own calendar anymore. You're just letting everyone take your time from your calendar without any intention behind it. So I don't think there's any one right way to schedule meetings. I want to say that before I give this advice, but I do think you want to figure out when you want to take your meetings. When is that most productive for you? When does that make sense scheduling with the rest of your life? And be in control of your calendar. So maybe you prefer to have 1 or 2 days a week, and those are the only days you take meetings. You don't take meetings any other days unless it's like an odd week and you have to for some reason. Maybe you have a week where you have 4 big meetings and you want to do 1 a day, so you're fresh for each one each time. That's actually how I am with podcasting. I don't like to do a ton at once. And next week at the time of this recording, again, I'm recording this early, but I'll have a bunch of interviews, all like 1 or 2 a day in 1 week versus batching them all in 1 day, because that's what works for me. Maybe you only take meetings after 10 a.m. So you get to focus on your business for those first 1 or 2 hours of your workday. And then you go into like possibly a meeting after that. Maybe you don't take meetings on Fridays or Mondays or whatever it is. It's totally up to you, but have a plan and not just an open calendar, because before you know it, your open calendar is going to have like 20-minute meetings every 2 hours and you never get anything done because you're always being pulled away into these random meetings. So if you're curious though, like what do I do with meetings? It's changed so much throughout my business, but I can tell you exactly what I do right now. So right now, and for most of this year, I don't take meetings on Mondays or Fridays, period. Like if you're scheduling a call with me as a client, as a potential customer, as someone who's bought something, podcast interview, whatever it is, I'm not doing Mondays or Fridays. Another thing, we have a standing team meeting over for my team. Me and Abby meet every Tuesday afternoon. So during that time slot, I don't take any meetings. And so that's always blocked off like that entire hour plus like obviously the time right before and after. And then unless I'm flexing to someone else's schedule, like a client who's in another country or a podcast interview on someone else's show where they only give me certain availability, I typically only take meetings between 10 a.m. and 3 p.m. Central Standard Time. So I'm giving myself that first 1 or 2 hours of the workday to just focus on my business. And then I don't do after 3 p.m. because I am just not my best self. After a certain hour of the workday, my productivity goes down. It's interesting. Whenever I'm interviewing other people's podcasts, whenever the interview is later in the afternoon, I can tell that I'm like more sluggish on the call and I do better with morning interviews. So whenever possible, I'm picking those earlier time slots. But again, like we don't always get to pick the time for things. Like for example, last week I was interviewed on someone else's show. Really excited for that interview to come out. But we did it. She's in a different time zone than me. She's actually in Australia. And so we were doing that meeting, I want to say like 5 p.m. my time. So I was talking with her from like 5 to 6 and that worked. Like I made it work that week. But that's typically not what I'm doing. So another little hack I do, because I do like to keep my calendar open for that Tuesday when I'm available, Wednesday and Thursday going into the week. But what I do is in my weekly planning session on Sundays, I look at my calendar and see, okay, what have people already scheduled with me? And I had Tuesday through Thursday open, generally speaking, for both like podcast interviews if I'm asking someone to be on my show or for calls with potential customers for my template shop. I do calls. If you ever want to schedule a call with me, email us and I can give you info on that. But I do take calls for people who are considering website templates. And then also sometimes client meetings, all of that. So I typically have Tuesday through Thursday during those hours I told you open. And then on Sunday when I do the weekly planning, I'll look and see, okay, do I have like no meetings on any of those days already? And I'll block that day off. So like this week, for example, I did have a meeting yesterday, but then I blocked off today because I knew going into the week that I had that meeting yesterday. So then people only really had the option going into the week to schedule with me on Wednesday. Anyway, I know that might kind of sound confusing, but basically like I leave it open those 3 days, but then I make it tighter once the week is actually starting. So random stuff doesn't come in on days when it doesn't make sense. But the point is to just be really intentional about when you're taking meetings. You're more taken out of focus than you realize by constantly taking on meetings or errands or whatever it is. And I also have to say it's so funny because I'm like not even taking my own advice a little bit here, but it's just also life for me lately. But you probably couldn't even tell from the way this will be edited. But when I was going through this point number 5, I actually got a call relating to my dad's estate stuff that I'd completely forgotten about that was scheduled for noon today. And so they called me and I had to take that call. And it was just, that was bad planning on my part, but it did take me out of the zone of this episode for a second. I had to re-listen to what I had already recorded. So that's not ideal. And that's what I'm saying, being more intentional about your meetings so that like, if you're doing something like what I'm doing right now, you cannot be like me and getting out of the zone on something that you then have to get back on the zone on. So anyway, that's just a little vulnerability there that I don't get this perfect all the time either. And I schedule meetings I forget about. Okay, number 6, I got 2 more left, 2 more big tips. This one's going to be really short, but don't hang out in your inbox all day. So if you scroll back a little bit, go listen to episode 79 of my podcast if you have not already. It's actually been a really popular episode, but I talk about handling your email inbox better and faster. And so I'm going to direct you there for a deep dive on this. But one of the biggest time takeaways in our business, I think, is when every time we get a new email, we open it. Even when we're like, I'm not even going to reply right now. Even when we're trying to focus on something else, we open the email. That's constantly taking you out of your productivity state of whatever it is you're working on. So quit being in the inbox all day. Maybe like if you get pesky notifications on your phone, on your laptop, wherever, get those off. You don't need the notifications. Instead, be intentional with your inbox time. I'm actually going to do inbox time. I'm going to finish recording this episode. I'm going to take a lunch break, and then I'm going to have inbox time. And when I'm in my inbox, I'm going to right now I can already see I have like 6 or 7 unread messages that have happened since I started recording this, and I haven't looked at them, but I am going to dive into those at a time when I'm actually able to be all in and respond versus just looking at them constantly. Okay, and this last tip, this is such a game changer for me. Use a project management tool to track your to-do list. And this is good for if you are a team, if you are working solo, it really doesn't matter. And I'd encourage you guys who don't have a team yet, even if you don't think you'll ever have a team, going ahead and starting working with a project management system just for yourself is going to be huge. So you should not be storing all the things you have to do in your brain or on a to-do list, on a sheet of paper, on some little to-do list app. That's not where you should be storing all the important things you're doing in your business. So having a project management system is a game changer because you can always know what's being worked on, where you are in a project. You can create recurring to-do lists for things you do multiple times, multiple systems you have, so you don't even have to think about it. So to give you an example of this, because this is a huge time saver for us, but for every single podcast episode, and we've done, 80 plus at this point, every single episode, we have a to-do list that we create from a template that has exactly every step that has to happen in the order it needs to happen, who it's assigned to, notifications happen when one thing's done so the other person knows that that piece of the puzzle was done. And we have a template we start with, one for guest interviews because those are a little different, and then one for solo shows. So every time I go to record a podcast, I don't have to worry about forgetting a step because my past self who made those templates based on what we need for each episode did it for me. So I just look in the template, and actually when I'm done recording this episode, I will go into the to-do list for this episode and I will mark off that I've recorded it. And then the person who does the next thing will be notified that now it's time to edit it. And then I'll notify the next person that now it's time to write the blog post for it. And we just all have it there, and we can all look at any point and see, okay, hey, has that episode been edited yet? Have the show notes been written yet? Have we done the social media graphics yet? Like, it's all right there. And with that example, even you can kind of see that that's helpful even if you don't have a team. Like if you're doing every one of those steps yourself or whatever it is, just having that list so that you're not keeping it all in your brain is so huge. And I know some of you might be like, well, what project management system do you use? We use Basecamp. I really, really absolutely love Basecamp. But I want to emphasize that I don't think it's the tool that's the most important thing. And I think sometimes people get hung up on which project management system is the best? And then you don't pick one because you're just hopping around from system to system and never, going into one fully. So I would say try a few of these tools, see what you like best for this season of your business, and just go with that one and don't obsess over it. So as an example, I've used Basecamp now really for all of 2020 and a little bit of 2019. Before that, though, I used Trello. We used that for 8 months, maybe even a whole year. I've also used Asana. I know I might not be saying that right. I always say the yoga way, so however you pronounce that one, but that's another popular one. And I've also used Monday.com. And so I've really tried a lot of the major ones, and I think they all have pros and cons to them. And I've settled on Basecamp for a bunch of different reasons that are not the point of this episode. And it's actually, though, interesting. Basecamp is the most expensive of all of those options, which is interesting, but that's the one we settled into. And I like their features the best because I actually put my design clients in it and use it to manage their projects as well. And something interesting about Basecamp is it does not cost more money when you have a bigger team. So the more people I put in there, it stays the same price. Whereas a lot of those others, it might be like free with one person, but then when you add more people, it costs more. So anyway, it doesn't matter which tool you use though is the point. I'd recommend though, like any of those I just said, Basecamp, Trello, Asana, Monday, whatever. Go look at all those, get a free trial and just try it and see like what systems can I put in here that now I'm going to follow in my business. What's something I do over and over again that I can create a to-do list for and then just run off that to-do list, make it into a template and reuse it every time you go to do that same thing. Because it's seriously such a game changer, a time saver, and it gives you more mental space to think about the things that move your business forward because you're not thinking about what's that next step again after I record a podcast interview. I don't have to think about that because it's all just there in the project management system. Okay, so like I said at the beginning of the episode, I wanted you guys to think about, okay, what's one of these tips I want to actually move forward with this week and put into action? So I'm going to read them out to you again. And as I read this list, think about like, what are two of these that I want to do right now? Maybe start doing today. And I'd love for you to share with me on Instagram which one of these you're going to try. Maybe post it to your stories or send me a DM, leave a podcast review about it, whichever one. But I want to hear from you which ones you're going to do. So the first one was listening to the binaural beats in that YouTube video I am recommending, or another one you find. The second thing, scheduling your entire workday in advance. As a reminder, that's episode 46 of the podcast where I dive into how to do that in more detail. Number 3, try batch working. Like however that works for you, it does not have to be perfect, but some version of batching like task with like task. Number 4, take breaks in your workday. Maybe right now you need to take a break. Maybe you're listening to me while you're working on a client project or something. Go outside, take a walk, get some fresh air, pause and read, maybe go to the gym, take an actual lunch break, just take a break. Number 5, be intentional about when you take meetings and really protect your calendar. Number 6, don't hang out in your inbox all day. Have designated inbox time and then pull yourself out of the inbox to work on productive tasks. And again, episode 79 of the podcast is all about inbox management. And number 7, use a project management tool to track your to-do list and to create systems to always know like what are you working in your business to move the needle forward. It doesn't matter if you have a team or if you're a solopreneur, a project management system can be huge. So those are the 7 things. Okay, so which ones are you going to try for working smarter, not harder? Let me know. I'd love to hear from you. And I hope you enjoyed this episode. Please share with a friend who you think would benefit from it. And I'll be back next week with something new. All right, bye guys. Thank you for listening to this podcast episode all the way until the end. I appreciate you being here. And if you enjoyed this episode, then I want to invite you to check out my website template shop too. Over on elizabethmccravy.com, you'll find show it website templates that are easy to use, strategically designed, and created to help you book more clients and customers. Maybe your current website is really boring. Maybe it's a challenge to update, and maybe even it's that thing that you really feel like is just completely holding your business back. Your website needs to be strategically and intentionally designed in order for it to convert your viewers into raving customers, and that's exactly what my M-Shop templates do. So these are pre-made show it website templates where you can plug and play your content into it with ease and then get started with a website that's designed to actually help you make more money. These templates are designed to be SEO friendly on the back end, and they're not just pretty, but they are very strategic and with all the strategies I teach on this podcast. And best of all, they're easy for you to set up all by yourself. So shop them at elizabethmccravy.com/shop and come join the M-Shop family of hundreds of happy customers. And as an added perk, you can use the code BBPodcast at checkout to get 10% off any template as a thank you for being a part of the podcast family. So that's BB Podcast for 10% off any template over at elizabethmccravy.com. And if you love this podcast, don't forget that you can subscribe on Apple Podcasts so that you never miss an episode, and leave a rating and review for the show wherever you're listening. Share it with a friend, share it on Instagram or Facebook. That's a great way to support the podcast and get the word out. All right, I'll be back next week with another new episode.